Hello, and welcome to Immigration Talk, a space where we hear from an expert on matters related to the immigration industry, law and policy, and practice. I'm Rosalie Van Staldeinen, and joining me is RCIC Joe Kenney. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, what are BC PNP's priorities for 2026, and how might immigration practitioners respond?
Yeah, so just to put it in context, 2025 was probably a low point in terms of the quotas that the federal government was giving to the PNPs. So we saw, reduced number of invitations, reduced number of nominations, and that was a consequence of the federal government's overall effort to bring immigration numbers down. So this year, I think most of the PNPs, including BC, have got a slight bump in their numbers that they can nominate, their allocations, as I call them. And so this year, BC PNP has announced what their priorities will be based on, the allocation they have from the federal government this year. So last year, they were quite limited because I think they had a bunch of applications from the previous year that hadn't been nominated yet. And so they were limited to how many new invitations they could do because they had only so much to nominate. So this year, I think they have a little bit more room. So they've been able to establish some priorities. The announcement was on April 23rd. They put it on their website and they sent it out by email. So basically, they've got three core objectives: care, which is strengthening healthcare and other services like veterinary care and education, build, which is construction largely, and then innovate, which is sort of a continuation of what they did in 2025, which was nominate either very high earners, like people earning $150,000 a year or something, or people who are getting very high scores in their BC PNP registrations. So what they've done is they've established 36 occupations under care, so it includes healthcare, education, childcare, veterinary care. So most of the occupations are in healthcare. Then you have like secondary, primary school teachers, early childhood educators, and then you have some veterinary positions as well. So they're going to be doing targeted draws and have done. They did a targeted draw for health on May 6th and for veterinary on May 6th and education on May 6th. So all three of those were targeted already. And they did a construction build, as they call it. In that case, there's only 9 occupations, so it's a much smaller list than you have for the care objective. And then innovate again is basically nominating people with what they call high economic impact invitations. So people who are either making upwards of $125,000 a year or have scored very highly in the BC PNP registration. Another couple of points that are interesting: they've closed the entry-level and semi-skilled stream. So the last invitations for that category were in December of 2024, and there's no indication it will reopen. They're also shelving plans to create new international graduate streams. So it's never been harder for international graduates to become permanent residents, I think, than it is now, at least not in the last 20 years. So basically, you used to have an express entry option after you had a year of experience, or you'd have the BCPA option perhaps even sooner than that. Because of the high cutoffs for express entry, it's very hard for international graduates to get invited. And without specific streams for the BC PNP, unless you're in those core areas, healthcare, construction, trades, it's going to be very difficult to get nominated as an international student. So some good news and some bad news, I guess. I mean, they are inviting people. Like the draw that they did on May 6th, the total was about 400 people were invited in those core areas. They're also doing draws for high economic impact individuals. So the last two draws were 125,000 a year was the minimum to get invited, or you were scoring 135 or 138 points with the BC PNP. So these are individuals that obviously are earning very highly or have other attributes. Perhaps they're in a region of BC that doesn't get a lot of immigration. The other aspect of this strategy they've announced is that 35% of nominations will be for outside of the Lower Mainland. So they're targeting the regions. So that's good news for some people. So as a practitioner, you need to be able to find people who can get a chance of getting invited. So people in the trades, carpenters, plumbers, people in education, early childhood educators. Those are the kind of positions that BC PNP is targeting. Those are the kind of positions that you have a chance of getting invited, even if you're not scoring very highly or you are not earning, over 100,000 a year. So there are options for those particular occupations, but again, it's very limited. Along with that, they're still doing the entrepreneur stream, but the numbers are quite small. They typically invite between 5 and 15 people a month under the entrepreneur stream. So it's it's meant to be for high economic impact as well. So that's really where we stand in 2026 with the BC PNP. The 3 objectives: care, build, and innovate. And a 36 occupation list in care, a 9 occupation list in build, and then you have the high earners and the high scorers for the innovate objective. And like I said, I think it's a little bit more encouraging than 2025. You see a more, a wider variety of people being invited. And that's good for practitioners because then they have more people that they can seek out to help get their immigration. Like I said, it's not an easy time to actually transition to permanent residence, and especially for international students. So these things will continue to evolve. I think probably next year you'll probably see another increase in the quotas for the provinces. They want more, but the federal government is trying to keep a limit on the numbers. So we'll see what happens in 2027. But this is a little bit of good news for 2026.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Joe, for walking us through these key priorities and sharing your insights into how we might respond as practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk again.